Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Northern Ireland Heritage Gardens Trust Spring Lecture 2026. And isn't the timing of our spring lecture perfect, coinciding with the weather of today and the state of our blossoming gardens? This evening, one of our own committee members, Claire Woods, MBE, has agreed to present our lecture entitled Sustainability in a Heritage Garden, Hillsborough Castle and Gardens, the Successes and Challenges. And considering the amount of rain we've had November to February, that might be one of the challenges, don't know. Apart from being a lovely lady, Claire is one of the King's right-hand ladies in Northern Ireland. She is head gardener and gardener manager at Hillsborough Castle and has been managing and developing the gardens for the past 7 years. Claire has worked in horticulture throughout her career, studying horticulture at both Newcastle and Bath universities, having achieved a master's in horticulture. She spent many years teaching and lecturing at CAFRE, the College of Agriculture. She is an active member of this committee, Northern Ireland Heritage Gardens Trust, and the Irish Gardens Plant Society, and is a fellow of the Institute of Horticulture. Ladies and gentlemen, Claire Woods.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry for the minor technical glitches there. Unfortunately, we just had to come in to my presentation from a slightly different angle this evening. I'm delighted to be here to talk to you about sustainability at Hillsborough Castle and Gardens. And as Mike has said, I've been there 7 years, been here 7 years now, and there have been lots of successes and challenges in that time. But a little bit, first of all, on who we are. Hillsborough Castle and Gardens is run and by historic royal palaces. And we're an independent charity. We generate our own revenue from our visitors and through philanthropic donations to fulfill our charitable purposes. And we manage 6 sites in all. All of the sites are run as businesses. We've got Banqueting House, Kew Palace, the Tower of London, Hampton Court Palace, Kensington Palace, and then Hillsborough Castle and Gardens. So we, as an overall charity, we have a wealth of experience in managing sites of historical interest and significance, and in heritage gardens, they don't get much better than Hampton Court Palace. We aim to be a charity for everyone, for people now and in the future. And what we want to do is act for the future and make a positive impact on the planet. Our plan for sustainability really focuses around 3 different areas. People, first of all, and these include our own staff, our stakeholders, our partners, and our visitors. And that's quite a lot of people when you add it all up. We have our staff, Historic Royal Palaces in total has just under 1,000 staff. Our stakeholders are all our lenders, our donors, and everyone who comes to who works with us, along with our partners, and of course, most importantly, our visitors. At Hillsborough Castle this year, over the last year, we've had just about 120,000 visitors. In terms of sustainability, we're also looking at data, because if you don't know what you have, you don't know how well you're looking after it, and you don't know if it's getting any better. So it's really important to increase the consistency and the quality of the data that we have. And we started that this year with a major survey. And then we have our actions, and these at the moment are our immediate actions. These are what we're actually doing. So this is what I have to do on the ground to make sure that our garden is sustainable. So when I'm talking about the garden at Hillsborough, I'm talking about 98 acres of enclosed historic parkland. And you can see, don't know if you can, hopefully you can see my mouse there. You'll see the castle, which is a long L-shaped building right on one side of it. Unlike a lot of stately homes, it's not in the centre of the domain, but it's at the side and joins on to the lovely Georgian Square in Hillsborough itself. We then have areas of woodland walks, of lawn with parkland trees, formal areas such as Yew Tree Walk and the Granville Garden. We have our walled garden, which is just under 4 acres, along with a lake, a very large meadow here, which doubles up as our overflow car park, a smaller meadow at the back, and then number 1, which is in a way one of the reasons that we were able to open as a visitor attraction. That's our car park. So when I look at sustainability in my role as head gardener, we look at 5 different pillars. The first one is carbon, the second water, then waste, biodiversity, and supply chain. And those really are important to me in everything that I'm doing from day to day. I'm thinking about them in all of the different actions that we take here in the gardens. And you can see this is one of the ones that we do, which is growing a lot of local cut flowers, because there is a huge carbon footprint with importing cut flowers. So we grow a lot here, and actually we're intending to grow a lot more this year. My colleagues that work in sustainability actually work under 13 different strands. So they're also looking at things like IS, procurement, finance, food and drink, events, projects. But thankfully, those don't come under my remit in the gardens. So while they're important to us as an organisation, I don't have immediate responsibility for them. But I've just broken it down into the 5 pillars tonight, and I'm going to talk through really what we do in the gardens and what you can do in your own garden to reduce our carbon footprint, and looking at as well at the other 4 pillars. So in terms of carbon footprint, the first thing is energy saving. So I'll put a warning out here tonight. If I go dark, it's because the lights in my office have gone off. Because I haven't moved enough. So you'll maybe see me do strange sort of movements with my hands to try and get the lights on again. So energy saving is very important. Energy consumption, and that is everything from just closing the doors and making sure that we don't let the heat out, only heating areas that are used, and heating areas that are used to make most effective use of that. And some people laugh when they come into our up space to find gardeners have left their wet coats on the floor, but that's because we've got underfloor heating, and the best way of getting them dried out for the next day is to leave them on the floor. So we look at energy consumption, and that can be even, the amount of energy that we use in our flamethrowers. We don't use chemical herbicides, but we do use flamethrowers. So it's one of those things, you don't use the chemical, but then there is an energy side to using the kerosene. So we have to balance those things up, and we haven't got everything right yet. We definitely still have a lot of these things to work through. Fuel usage is very important, and you'll see in this slide one of our lovely electric buggies. We're now changing our fleet over from petrol and diesel to electric buggies. With 98 acres, it's just not possible to walk everywhere and carry all your tools and transport all your equipment. So we do need some modes of transport round the gardens, and these little electric buggies are proving very valuable. We also use a lot of electric equipment, and we now have a full set of electric equipment. That's everything from trimmers, blowers, hedge trimmers, chainsaws, are all battery operated. And most of the staff like using them most of the time. Some staff still prefer their petrol blowers. They are the electric ones just don't have quite as much force with them. But we have gone towards electric equipment. And the other thing that we look to is to try and encourage people, where possible, to use public transport. This is more on our other sites where they're easier to get to by public transport. In Northern Ireland, as you would know, that sometimes it's not easy to get everywhere by public transport. It can be limited. However, we're very lucky at Hillsborough, and we've got a main bus that leaves the new bus station in Belfast and comes straight to the door in the square. So that's what we're doing on carbon. But also we think of the garden as a carbon sink. And everything that we have in it, from grass to trees, is all will hold carbon. And even waste products, things like the lovely birch twigs that have been used to make this nice heart, are holding carbon. So the plan is not to get rid of anything off site, but to keep all our waste on site and to keep it in as a carbon sink. In terms of our practices, our sustainable practices, again, we are not registered as an organic garden, but we do follow organic principles. And with that in mind, we're not applying a lot of fertilizers and chemicals to our lawns, but we do use some mechanical means to try and improve the drainage while retaining the carbon within the grass. But if we were to maintain all our grass by ourselves, we would do nothing else. So now and again, at the back end of the year, we have some lovely moily cattle that come in and graze the small meadow, the gasworks field, for us. And I'll talk a wee bit about that later on. But what we want to try and do is to promote biodiversity. We've got a lovely orchid here, and we leave as many areas of grass uncut as possible. You can see in this slide, there's some lovely yellow rattle, also called meadow maker. Very important plant to have if you're going to have a wildflower area or an uncut meadow, because it's needed to control the grasses and to stop them from going to stop them taking over and out competing the likes of this lovely orchid. On the other side, we've got the formal gardens, and we are a garden. We're open to the public. We also are the official royal residence in Northern Ireland. So there are times when the garden has got to host garden parties, and it's also got to act as a backdrop for all the events that we hold here, and for our public engagement teams who do their trails 4 times a year. So we've got to have attractive gardens as well. You can't just leave everything to nature. Sometimes our displays are not quite so sustainable. Occasionally you have problems in the garden. We had an issue with our glasshouse. The window actually fell out of it, and it was being held up by props, and it was really a health and safety worry. So we took it down. That left us a rather ugly wall, and we had a big event coming up. So we just needed to put a display on it, and these were some lovely autumn mums. I would tend to try and not to use bedding plants, and not to use plants that are only grown really for one season. So that was one of our not so sustainable displays. The other one are tulips. Tulips in our climate don't and especially in our site here at Hillsborough, don't naturalise well. We did try to naturalise some viridiflora ones, but they got tulip fire, so we've had to lift them. So with our tulips, we have reduced the number that we're growing because we really are just growing them and then throwing them out in the one season. So perhaps not such a sustainable practice. But some of the very sustainable practices that we follow are mulching. Someone asked me recently the 3 top tips for sustainable gardening, and I said mulch, mulch, and mulch. Oh, there's my lights out. There they are. And you can see that we use we mulch, and this is planting using a bulb planter planting. So we're doing no dig and trying not to turn up the garden. And we've now used a bulb planter for planting potatoes, and in this case, planting sweet corn. Washing is very important when we've got big events coming up. But again, we're not using any chemicals. So unfortunately, we just have to do it with buckets of water and scrubbing brushes. But we're very lucky that we have a fantastic group of volunteers, and they come and help us on days like that. Actually, most of them come in every week and enjoy either 1 or 2 sessions volunteering with us. The photograph on the other side is of supports in the garden, and I'm pleased to say that I haven't actually bought any canes since I started. So any of the canes that you see in the garden are at least 7 years old. And what we try to do is to use our own hazel and willow that we grow on site. We do have a small stand of bamboo round the back of the visitor centre, and we will harvest some out of it on occasion. But the key thing is to create and to use products that we have grown on site to create our plant supports. When you're gardening sustainably, you have to work with the formal and the informal, and not the formal isn't always you can't make everywhere formal, nor can everywhere be informal, and there has to be a balance between it. You can see the moor there and a little bit of striped lawn. The striped lawn looks good from a distance. If you look up close, you'll see that it actually is full of clover and daisies and other small herbs as well. And as long as it looks good from a distance, that's what I'm looking for. But there are many, many areas where we can be less formal and rather informal. There used to be very clear beds around all of our yew trees on Yew Tree Walk, and it just took forever to weed them, and it wasn't a sustainable practice. So we now have just let the natural grass and turf areas grow right up to the bottom of the yew trees, and they still look well. Oh, when we get it wrong, and we haven't got everything right here yet at all. When we were redeveloping the gardens, which was between 2016 and 2019, there was a choice made to use a product called Ballylusk gravel. It's a Hoggen type material, and the idea is that as people walk on it, it beds down and it forms a nice compacted surface. Unfortunately, it doesn't work well on the hills that we have at Hillsborough, and the minute we get any heavy rain, it all washes downhill. So at the moment, we are looking at ways that we can repair this, because repairing it every time we get rain is not sustainable at all. We need a longer term, more durable solution. So I think we're going to be looking at some major drains up here along the top. Oh, disaster and decay. We have had, as everyone will know, lots of storms over the last few years, and we've had quite a number of trees down, and that is it's good in some ways, but it has to be dealt with. Where trees have come down and where the wood is lying and it's not a health and safety risk and it's not going to get in anyone's way and it's not lying across the main formal gardens, we will just let it lie where it falls and let nature take its course. And you can see some beautiful fungi here on the slide. But there are trees that we have to take down because of plant health issues. And you can see some lovely big bracket fungi growing at the bottom of this beech tree. You can see another, this is a cedar in the middle, and when it was taken down, you can see the area of decay in it. And we use tree surgeons to come in and do that. So we do have to look after plant health in a garden, because if you don't, then you just lose a lot of plants and the garden itself may become unsustainable. So you need to make sure you're keeping the plants healthy and you're keeping them in the garden in good health. But all is not lost. We had a lot of big trees, as I say, came down in the storms over the last few years. So we sent them all to our local timber yard and we got them sawn into planks, and those planks then have come back and they're currently drying out, and that will allow us over the next number of years to create little benches and tables and different structures within the garden. This little bench, actually, interestingly, is in the Lost Garden, and in the recent flood all you could see was the top of it. So we had about between 30 and 40 centimeters deep of a flood water. Sometimes when we think about sustainable practices and sustainability in a garden, we forget that we want to sustain some of the views, because plants will grow over time. And if you don't keep your plants in check, you may lose the original design intention in any garden. So we've got in the centre here Lady Alice's Temple, and it was planted on the far side of the pond at the bottom of Yew Tree Avenue, very much as a focal point in the garden. So it's important that we keep the yew trees growing. It's important also that we control the planting in front of it. Just in the centre, we've got a lot of gunnera growing around the pond, and I have staff at the moment who are removing quite a lot of that gunnera because it's blocking the view of the temple. We also have our lovely lake, and again, it's really important when you're walking around the lake for there to be openings in the plantings, openings in the willows that have been planted, so that you can get lovely views like this one across the lake. Sometimes, though, presentation is really important. And here I've got my two current apprentices, Emily and Colin, and they're just doing the final little tidy up before a garden party. And you can see the marquees and everything laid out for that. So I wouldn't want to be keeping the gardens at this standard of presentation all the time. It really wouldn't be sustainable, but there are times when presentation is important. I've mentioned mulching already. We mulch in lots of different areas in the garden, but mainly in the walled garden. And you can see two different sorts of mulch being used here. There's a straw mulch being used on the paths between the beds, and then the beds themselves are being mulched with a digestate material. Now, it's one of the one of the mulching materials that we buy in, or well, we don't buy it in, we have an agreement with our farm across the road, and it's the solid fraction out of digested slurry, and it makes a lovely mulching material, and we apply it just the minute that we have taken the previous crop out of the garden. On the right hand side, I've got another apprentice and two other members of staff here, and they are seed saving, and actually they are working very hard. If you can see just between their hands, they're macerating some seeds. I can't actually, I've forgotten what they are now, but we try and do as much seed saving as we can in the garden, both in the wall garden and in the wider grounds. We have to maintain plants, and I've said that earlier, that we need to maintain their plant health, but we also want to maintain the longevity of the plants. This is the big rhododendron that's just at the back of the Granville garden. I'm not sure when it was planted, but I know that in the 1990s, it was in the Guinness Book of Records as the world's biggest rhododendron. Unfortunately, there's a bigger one in Cornwall now, and there are taller ones in both Japan and India. But we want to try and retain it and maintain it. But you can see, if you look at the top of the photograph on the, I'm not sure whether it's your left or right side, but on the side that I'm showing you with the cursor now, you can see quite a bit of senescence going on here. And what was happening was the oldest and the middle part of the rhododendron was really starting to die back, and actually it had fallen and broken on both sides here. So what was happening was, instead of it all coming out into bloom at once, we were getting it blooming in different stages, and it sort of spoils the overall effect. So if we look on the other side, you can see that there's a much bigger gap here now, because what we have done is we have pruned right down inside, and thankfully it's all coming back really nicely. Over the next number of years, we will successively prune the rest of it to get it to rejuvenate it. And that happens with, especially with rhododendrons throughout the gardens. If they lose branches or if they fall over, we will prune them very hard to get them to rejuvenate. In order to be sustainable as well, you need to have a great variety of plants, and we grow everything from wildflowers to fruit to vegetables to ornamental plants. As Mike said in his introduction, I'm a member of the Irish Garden Plant Society, and I know there's quite a few members in the audience tonight. And I have my own little, this is Claire's messy corner in the polytunnel, where I will grow on and propagate some Irish garden plants for use in the garden. Moving then on to water in the garden. Water, yes, was very important. If you had asked me on the 27th of January about water, I wouldn't have given you a very nice answer, because the gardens were really badly flooded. A lot of our paths got washed away. But nature is a wonderful thing, and plants are so resilient. You would hardly know that we had had the floods in the garden. In some places, there's a lot of gravel still lying on top of beds that was washed there. But generally speaking, the plants have really survived really, really well. What we're looking to do with water is to reduce water usage. We have some areas where we have to water. We have quite a lot of pots and containers, but what we try and do is use pots that are as large as possible. A lot of them are half barrel size, and that does reduce your watering as well. If they're bigger, they retain the water better. We try to reduce water usage by mulching and by planting during after wet periods or when rain is forecast. We don't routinely use sprinklers in the garden at all, only in very dire circumstances. We tend to water from taps rather than from hoses because it takes a little bit more effort, and you're more likely to reduce your water usage by using taps. Our toilets are flushed using grey water, and in terms of garden watering, as I said, we reduce it. And one of the big things is to stop leaks. Unfortunately, we have a leak at the moment, but we hopefully will find it very soon. And that is important in your own garden. Make sure that you don't have leaks in taps, have leaks in pipes. We're a big site with a lot of water on it, a lot of pipes, and sometimes finding the leak can be a little bit tricky. So what we're doing, this is actually an old slide. This was our Heath Robinson rainwater harvesting system, where we used 2 cubes and put them up on some racking at the back of the tractor shed, and it works very well. So we now have a lovely new tank with UV filtration on it, so that we're not going to pass on any nasty diseases in the water. But this was what we started with. So we're looking at our wastewater reclamation, collecting as much of it as we can, and also by reducing demand. This is our lovely new rainwater harvesting tank, and the water, say, all goes in through the UV, which is in the inside of the building, and there's our little tap on the outside, which attaches then and it goes over to our polytunnels. In terms of waste, so waste is all about using less, reducing and reducing, and that is things like saving seed. It's things like reusing pots. We try not to buy pots at all, but to reuse pots time and time again. And it's only when they really are absolutely past being used again will I permit them to be put in the skip. So we reuse compost by putting it into our compost heaps. We reuse things like nets that we use for strawberries. They get taken off, rolled up and used again and again. We also want to waste less in what we do. And because we're no dig now, when we're clearing beds in the wall garden, we're only taking off the green material, we're leaving the roots in. So there's less waste actually being generated. And we're making our own compost. You can see our compost bays there in the photograph. All of the green material from the site comes down and is made into compost. It takes somewhere between 4 and 6 months to produce a whole bay, but we then find at particular times of the year, especially autumn and in the spring, that we're using a huge amount of compost back onto the gardens again. Important when we're making our own compost, not everything that is taken from the gardens goes here. We do have a dump pile round the back as well, which is really just a slow composting area, in that things like perennial weeds and rose clippings that perhaps have disease on them will go into that, and they eventually will compost down. But we don't use that compost back on the garden again. It's just spread over the corner of the meadow. We make our own wood chip from any material that comes down, and I've mentioned before we grow our own canes and willow rods. We also, of course, have a cafe on site, and it produces quite a lot of cardboard. So the cardboard comes down and it gets added to our compost. And that's great because over the summer, when we've got quite a lot of green material going in, especially grass clippings, you need to make sure that you've got your green to brown ratio right. And the cardboard is great for layering up with our grass clippings. We also work with the CAFRE, and we have food waste, things like coffee and eggshells that are used in the garden. So we like to reuse and repair. We have a repair bucket in the tool shed where spades and forks and things that perhaps have broken shafts or something like that, they get put in that, and then it never seems to happen, though, that we have a slightly less busy period of the year in the garden. But when we do get a wet day, we can repair some of those, and we'll put shafts onto our spades and forks and things. We like to recycle as much as possible, reusing things. If you go out around the garden, you'll find that there are things like the tops of old chimney pots that we found, and we're able to recycle those. Our aim is zero to landfill. I'm not there yet, unfortunately, but that is our aim. And in time, I'm hoping that we will get there. So in order to mulch and to produce our own wood chip, you need a chipper. And this was probably one of the best pieces of kit that I've bought since I came. And you can see the lovely wood chip that it produces. If we're not chipping the wood waste, we can use it to make dead hedges. And this again is a lovely group of our volunteers who have been constructing dead hedges up in some of the woodland areas. It means that all stored carbon that's in that dead hedge is still on site, it's still there, and it's also then providing a super habitat for small birds. Just a few more slides of our compost bays. In order to be able to use the compost successfully in the gardens, we realized that we needed to sieve it. So we bought this little thing. It's called a jarrow. It goes on the front of the digger, and it's like two brushes that go round, and they sieve out the compost and make it useful. You also need something when you make compost in this volume to turn it, and at the moment we're using our telehandler. And then you can just see the compost pile in process. It doesn't look very pretty, but you can see a mix of red or brown and green material being used in there. It's just the jarrow. This is just a slide of a rhododendron that had a bit of a disaster, it got taken out when the big embothrium behind it fell on it. So we pruned it all back and it's come back really well. We reused materials around the site. This is just prunings from laurel, and they're used then to create edges in the garden and also to create this rather attractive handrail coming down the steps. We keep any old bricks that we have and we reuse those. The bricks were reused to create a new bed. We will reuse anything in the garden, so even our old clothes. This is Gertrude Jekyll, who was part of our scarecrow parade a number of years ago. Our little chimney pot that I mentioned earlier, reused as a planter for some succulents. You often think of succulents growing in terracotta and in pots, but we've also found that little logs, if you dig out a hole, put a couple of drainage holes in the bottom, can make very attractive succulent planters. In order to try and clean our water on site, we have reed beds up at the top end of the lost garden, and that's just a close-up of the laurel edging and the laurel being used as handrails. Within the garden then, biodiversity is one of our important pillars. And it's an integral part of our garden and of our woodland management plan, where we're looking at the flora, both the native plants and the plants of local provenance. And we're looking at the fauna. That's the large mammals, things like badgers, right down to all the insects and the pollinators and the soil microorganisms. Because we have such a diversity of habitats, we also have a lovely diversity of birds in the gardens. And we had 34 different birds recorded in the last Big Bird Watch. So what do we do to promote biodiversity? We're always planting trees and new plants. And when we're selecting plants, we're trying to select those that are either native or of local provenance or are linked to Ireland in some way, or on either on the RHS pollinators list or the Irish pollinators list as well. So we're looking for single flowers that are good for bees. Sometimes my gardeners, and especially those that like their floristry, would like double flowers, but we try to go for single ones as much as possible. We have reduced our grass cutting and only do what is absolutely necessary for presentation in the formal areas. And we're looking after our soil by no dig. And when you leave nature just to get on with it, it's amazing what will grow. And these are some of, I'm not a mycologist, so I haven't even attempted to name these, but these are some of our lovely fungi that we had growing in the gardens this autumn. Yeah, it seemed to be a very good autumn for fungi this year. We try and grow a lot of plants that will have lots of seeds and berries for the birds. This is Viburnum. We do try and promote our gardens really for native pollinators and native bees. And we're a conservation area for the native Irish black bee. And we have 3 hives, all of which have native Irish black bees in them. And they're set just to one side of the walled garden. So they've got a really good foraging area. The planting, as I mentioned way back at the beginning, we really don't do many bedding plants as such. All of the planting, we try and make it as sustainable as possible. We don't want to have to lift plants all the time. We don't want to have to replace them. So we're trying to get plants that will grow from season to season with really minimal work. Now, we have started and we have put some dahlias into our long borders. We lifted a few and some we just mulch. And I'm hoping that in years to come, we will just be able to give them a really good mulch during the autumn and they'll come through the winter for us. In terms of planters, if we do have planters, we make them up with a variety of sustainable plants, a variety of plants that are suitable for pollinators, and also ones that when the pot gets too congested, we can just take them out, split them up, and find a new home for them. Yeah, some plants are sustainable for 1 or 2 years. Others are sustainable for very much longer. This is the pinetum, and we've got these beautiful giant redwoods and coastal redwoods down here. So we're looking at a succession plan really for these to really continue this lovely, the feel of this lovely area. Sometimes things don't work out to plan. This was looks like a bunch of tulips that I've just pulled. The thing was, I didn't actually pull any of them. They were all nibbled off by horrible little vermin in our gardens. So another reason why we've moved away from tulips. This was a tulip display a couple of years ago, but as I've said, we're moving away from tulips. We also want to make sure that the gardens going forward have a collection of plants in them that people will want to come and see, that we have succession planting. And you can see here some of my colleagues from the Irish Garden Plant Society, and this was planting the Zelkova carpinifolia that was propagated by Jan Ravensburg from the one at Glasnevin. So we now have added to our plant collection that lovely Zelkova, because we do get issues and trees that come down, and we need to make sure that we have succession planting. I mentioned about using our own willow on site. We have quite a large area of willow, probably about half an acre, alongside the lake, and it's managed in 5 areas, and we coppice it one every 5th year, and that gives us a lovely resource in terms of willow rods to be able to produce little fences, to be able to make garden structures with, and to be able to grow plants on as plant supports. I mentioned open and single flowered plants. And this was a lovely dahlia that we had last year. It's called Pooh, and you can see it with its lovely tortoiseshell butterfly on it. So all the flowers and fruit and vegetables grown in the wall garden are all very much grown locally, and we use them either in the cafe or we bag them up and allow people to take some home with them and for a small donation, and that is very much supports then the garden. It means I can buy more bulbs, I can reinvest in the garden, I can apply plant supports and that sort of thing. So just a photograph obviously taken in the autumn when we had lots of apples and leeks and potatoes. Mentioned before about our bouquets. These are very popular and of course coming with no air miles. We have to make sure some of the challenges that you have in a historic garden are maintaining historic views, working with your public engagement colleagues and public engagement installations, and also keeping public out of certain areas to prevent damage. These are 2 slides of Moss Walk, which is an area, it was an old funeral path originally. It was then planted with lime trees in the 1860s, 1870s, we're not quite sure when. But if people were to walk up and down it, it would get trashed, it would really be ruined. So we have to keep people off that and allow it just to be as a vista. Within biodiversity, we're also looking at water and our habitats. We have swans and a whole plethora of wildfowl on the lake. The challenges are very much with algal blooms and blue-green algae. Luckily, we didn't have any this year. We did have some the year before. We also have to look after and manage our water levels, just to try and make sure that the plants growing around the edge have sufficient water, but yet we're not going to cause flooding in different areas. And we have to manage them for safety as well. And this is one of the things, when you're a garden open to the public, you do have to take these things into consideration. So any of our open waterways, we have to leave at least 1 meter of an uncut strip around all bodies of water. Sometimes that's not possible, so you need to put a little bit of fence in, and here we've got some CAFRE students. I don't know if there's any of them in the audience tonight, but they came down and had a day working with us. That is also a sort of one of the things I like to do in terms of thinking about the sustainability of gardeners going forward. We have to have, for any of these big gardens to be sustainable, they have to be maintained, and they have to be maintained by trained horticulturalists and gardeners. And we have to make sure that we have the next generation coming on as well to take over. Sometimes there are plants in the garden which I could cheerfully get rid of, and ones that all staff are allowed to get rid of and dig up, and that's the Spanish bluebell. We do thankfully have lots of lovely anemones and lots of the wild bluebell, the Hyacinthinoides non-scripta. We have wildflowers in other areas of the gardens, in the walled garden, and you can see here it's a perennial mix. Not the cornfield annuals that a lot of people expect, but there's some grasses in it. But we have about 30 different species in our wildflower meadows. There's another area down by Yew Tree Walk, which is a more ornamental meadow, and has lots of Camassia in it, as you can see here. The challenges very often with wildflower meadows are the appearance and perceptions from visitors. Some people don't like the slightly more unkempt look that you get with wildflowers, but I think that's a job of education for all of us as horticulturalists to make sure they understand the benefit of them. But what we do is we always leave a cut strip so that it looks intentional. Again, just another couple of slides of our meadows with orchids and with grasses within them. Wildflower mowing, this is something that I'm not sure that we've quite got right yet. We've tried using the John Deere and lifting the grass. We've tried using a power scythe, and both had their pros and cons. But the important thing is, when you're doing your wildflower mowing, is to lift the arisings, because you want to keep the nutrient levels low in the grass. So it's quite a job. We've just over an acre of wildflower in the wall garden, and it takes a while to cut it each year. I mentioned these lovely girls earlier, and they help us to graze the meadow of about 4 acres down in Gasworks. And they're great because when they're grazing, they're obviously, they do produce a little bit of dung, but it's very little. But they're also, because the ground is soft, they poach the ground a little. In other words, they break up the surface, and that leaves little areas of bare soil, and that bare soil then allows all sorts of native plants to come in and to grow and to take hold and increase and improve the biodiversity of the sward. But not everything has to be a wildflower in order to attract pollinators. So we've got an ordinary Kniphofia here and some Nepeta on this side, and then just some close-ups of our wildflower meadows. But some of the birds on site need short grass, so things like geese, and that's why you will see the geese in the area around the helipad and up around the castle. Some areas we can leave completely wild. The problem is sometimes if you do that you get invasive aliens coming in, and we have a little bit of American skunk cabbage that we have to control here. And on to the 5th pillar then, supply chain. This includes looking at procurement policy and sustainable procurement. So it's really simple things like thinking, well, you know, if something is £3 or £4 cheaper if I buy it on Amazon and it comes from England or it comes from China, if you buy it on other well-known online sites, but is that sustainable? Is it better to source your things locally? So here we try and do as much as we possibly can of local sourcing. and I will buy things as close to Hillsborough as possible. We're looking at our packaging. So when people supply things to us, is it in biodegradable or compostable packaging? We want to reduce single-use plastic as far as possible. And in the castle here, our food packaging is all compostable. We also are as near as we can be to being peat-free. We do still occasionally have some plants come into us in a peat compost, but we are taking them out of those as quickly as possible and using our own compost that we produce on site. We use coloured pots so that they're, when we do have to buy them, so that they're recyclable, and we do as much as we can. And as I've said there in the slide, and there is so much more we can do. And you can see we're using paper bags for our produce or no bags at all. And that sort of brings me to the end, looking at the 5 pillars of sustainability that we follow here at Hillsborough. Some things are going quite well for us. Other things, we've got quite a lot of work still to do. We can still and always reduce our energy usage. We can look at putting more carbon and sequestering more carbon. In the next few weeks, we'll be planting a new biodiversity hedge. So we're always looking at what we can do in terms of biodiversity. And about being local and encouraging people. If you were here on site, I'd be encouraging you to take a little bit of Hillsborough home with you. But I hope that from seeing these slides that you will take an idea or two to your own garden and make it that little bit more sustainable going forward, so that not only your own garden, but gardens like that here at Hillsborough are here for many, many years to come for many people to enjoy. Thank you very much.
Claire, that was absolutely fantastic. I think we can take a lot home from what you're doing up there tonight. And I love the way that you're actually linking up with the education side and CAFRE up there, that they come down and spend time with you to see what you're doing. I think it's so important for the education side of things as well. A lot of good comments coming in to say how good, enjoying the lecture tonight. You have a few questions though. And the questions are about the willow and how they're so exuberant, and how do you stop this from happening, branching out and that when you're using them in the garden?
Well, I think you have to look at, if you're growing willows, some species are better than others. Some of the species that are grown specifically for biomass will produce really, really long rods in 1 year, and actually you need to cut them every year. If you grow some of the coloured stem ones, things like black mall, and I can't remember them just off the top of my head at the moment, but the ones that basket weavers would use, they grow a little more slowly and have a finer rod each year. But it's about getting to know your willow and cutting it when appropriate, whether you leave it for 5 years or whether you have to cut it back every year. I know certainly there's one ornamental one that I grow in the garden, which is the Mount Asso. I'm sure lots of people know it, with the lovely pink catkins, but I would grow it, I would prune it every year. I'll cut it back, stool it back every year.
Hope that answers the question there. The other one is that how do you manage sustainability with contractors? Outside contractors.
Yes, outside contractors. So we have quite detailed contracts for contractors, where we're asking them about their waste, we're asking them about their fuel sourcing. For example, I have contractors coming in to do some fencing, and I was asking them for reassurances on where the wood where the posts came from, and if they were coming from a sustainable source, basically. So yeah, it's about asking lots of questions. We don't use a huge number of contractors. It's really just tree surgery and for odd one-off projects.
Very good. And the other thing is, but how do you use eggshells and in the gardens, and how do they work with the slug control of slugs or that?
Right. We use the eggshells in the garden not so much as a slug repellent, because if you're going to use them as a slug repellent, you have to crush them down, you have to dry them, and then you have to put them around your plants. If we were to do that at Hillsborough, we wouldn't do anything else. But we break them up and we just add them to our general compost, and it's just like adding a very fine grit. It helps the structure and the drainage in it. The coffee grounds, though, we use separately, and we'll use those as a mulch round materials in the wall garden.
Okay, there was a question there from Hui. I think she's involved with education down. Hui might be able to unmute and maybe ask that question, because it was if she's still with us there.
Hi, Margie. Hi, Claire. Thank you for the engaging talk. I'm not asking a question here, Margie. It's more or less a comment on Claire's slide.
On wildlife, is it? You said, I'm not sure if wildlife is happy with the wildflower meadows. Don't mind the human attitude or their perception. You're on mute, Hui, we can't hear you.
Hi, Margie.
I can hear you now.
Oh, yeah, I'm not asking the question. And Claire, thank you for the lovely engaging talk, including biodiversity, which is what my passion is. But anyway, yeah, I'm just commenting on your slide on the public perceptions on the wildflowers and meadows. I think here I said your wildlife is very happy with them. So I don't think you should care too much about the public perceptions here. So keep on with the good work. That's what I'm.
Thank you. Our problem is that we do have to keep our customers happy and ensure that our visitors are happy. So it can be a little bit of a balance sometimes.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah, but
Yeah.
for those area, I think the public
Yeah.
should understand it's not them. It's for other species apart from us.
That's right.
Yeah, but well done anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think they are all the questions. Does anybody else want
That's
to
great.
say anything? Or a lot of very complimentary comments there as well, Claire, on your talk tonight.
Thank you.
Well done.
Okay. Thank you indeed, everyone.
So can I come at that point?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Michael, work away.
Yeah, Claire, thank you very much. A very interesting talk, and I have a foolscap page of suggestions for myself here, which we can't talk about necessarily tonight, but I would imagine in committee meetings I'll be searching a bit more about all your thoughts there. Can I ask you, Claire, in terms of visitor numbers, and this has nothing to do with sustainability, but in terms of visitor numbers, are you achieving the numbers you had hoped for at the gardens?
We're working towards it. We're
Okay.
working towards it. We're not just there yet. We had, as you know, we opened in 2019, and we had 11 months before we had to close again with COVID. So we then had to start all over again, sort of building our reputation and everything. So we're getting more and more numbers every year, and we're hopeful that we will get to our target figure eventually.
Can I also ask you, colored pots? I didn't understand, why are colored pots recyclable?
Because in waste disposal facilities, they can't differentiate between a black pot and other waste, but they can differentiate with a colored pot. So you can recycle coloured pots.
I see. Okay. And just an observation, we have been mulching, and it won't be in the scale that you mulch, but we've been mulching dahlias for the last 3 years,
Mhm.
and that's been successful. But as you know, we're beside the sea, and
Yeah.
therefore we will not have the frosts that you might have. I think the problem we may have, particularly this year, is with the bulbs being damaged by the amount of moisture that has been in the,
Yeah.
in the garden. And
Yeah.
we're clay soil, so, and in spite of the fact that we've added all sorts of things to it, yeah. But anyway, we'll
Yeah.
discuss that along. Again,
Indeed.
Claire, hugely interesting. Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for attending the lecture and for your comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done, Claire. Well done.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Right.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Margie.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Claire.
Claire.
Well done.
Thank you, Margie.
Um,
Thanks, Peggy.